Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of Roads to Liberty. I'm your host, Randall Parker Jr., and we are joined with an excellent panel here today. From left to right on the bottom of your screen, you got Chuck, the Liberty Geek. You got Mike Daneau. You got Robert Kruger. And we're going to have a special guest appearing at the end of the program who I will not announce. Actually, he'll probably be appearing soon, but he'll be popping in, and he'll be a surprise guest for us. Today's episode is going to focus on the aggression of police in the state. It's going to focus on how the supposed services that police are supposed to be providing in the common ideology of people's brains, so to speak, whatever the right term would be for that, and the contrast against what security and protection would look like in a voluntary society. We're going to illustrate this through a number of stories that are real, that actually happened in the past couple years. Some of the stories might be recent, some of them might be a little bit further in the past. But each one of our panelists has a story for us to talk about and discuss. So we're going to spend about 15 minutes or so, 10 to 15 minutes on each story, try to get everyone's insight. And without much further ado, let's introduce the panelists, starting with Chuck, and we'll go down the line. Chuck's on mute. We could start with Robert Kruger and then go to Chuck.
All right. Sorry about that, but go ahead.
Well, hello. My name is Robert Kruger. I am the co-host of Voluntary Virtues Roundtable and the host of the Voluntary Virtues After Hours show, where we get a little bit more rambunctious. And then I also do the Thinking Anarchist, the Anarchist Experience. The Anarchist Experience is on Sundays from, let's see, 2:30 to 4 Mountain Standard Time, I think it is. I don't know, Eastern Standard Time, one of the two. Anyway, yeah, it's kind of like a parallel to the atheist, show that has the same name, the Anarchist Experience, the Atheist Experience, and the plan is to have people be able to call into the show and discuss their questions and get answers and debunk the mythology behind anarcho-capitalism. In any case, it's my pleasure to be on the show. Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go to Chuck. Tell us about yourself.
What's up, guys? This is Chuck, the Liberty Geek. I host a show that's normally from 9 to 9:30 Friday nights Eastern Time, called Liberty Geek. Basically, it's just me. How do I put this? Colliding nerd culture of various kinds with liberty movements of various kinds, and just trying to show that, yes, both things go together, and the state affects everything, even the things you don't think about, such as your hobbies. So.
Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you, Chuck. Mike,
Thanks
why don't
for
you tell
having
us? You're welcome. Thanks. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mike, and what your experience is with liberty and your background a little bit.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mike Daneau, and I am a voluntarist. And I spend my time, I do a little bit of adminning on statism and slavery. I have done a show on Voluntary Virtues Network called Freedom Live. And I spend a lot of time just basically spreading the message of liberty, little rants on Facebook here and there.
Excellent. Cool. All right, so we have another guest that will be popping in at some point, but I'll let that remain a surprise. I want to get into the first topic tonight. We're going to start with the one that probably many people have heard of. No, I'm sorry, Kruger's story.
Well, I think everybody's heard of my story. It was pretty prolific in the news.
Bring everyone up to speed anyway, just in case.
Yeah, it actually even made the Washington Post, but Reason Magazine did a video that was fairly well done on it. I'm going to work with the KOB article, which is the local news station to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Basically, what happened is that David Eckert finished shopping at Walmart in Deming, New Mexico, and after being seen leaving the vehicle and potentially having he might have had an open container. They believe that he was potentially having drugs in the vehicle. They brought out a canine unit. The canine unit said that there was, marked that there was some scent of drugs in the console area and in the seat area of the driver's seat. Of course, being that there was something in the seat of the driver's seat, at that point they are suspicious and think that perhaps this person is now hiding the marijuana in his anus. So,
which is where I know a lot of stoners. That's the main spot where you're going to stash it when you get pulled over. You go right for the butthole. I think.
Yeah, it's just gotta. All right, there we go. Good.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I feel full.
So while they detained him, they secured a warrant from a judge allowing for an anal cavity search, and they tried taking him to an emergency room in Deming, but the doctor there, actually having a spine and some morals, said that he would refuse it because it was unethical. And so they contacted the Gila Regional Medical Center in Silver City, and they agreed to perform the procedure, and a few hours later, Eckert was admitted. While he was there, he was his abdominal area was x-rayed, and no narcotics were found. So they exposed him to, eventually lethal x-rays. Then they performed an exam of his anus with their fingers. No narcotics were found. Then they performed a second exam with their fingers. No narcotics were found. Then they penetrated his anus to insert an enema, and he was forced to defecate in front of the doctors and the police officers. And the doctors searched his stool, and no narcotics were found. Then they penetrated his anus to insert an enema a second time. He was, again, forced to defecate. They searched his stool. No narcotics were found. Then they did it a third time. Another enema. No narcotics were found. They x-rayed him again. No narcotics were found. They prepared him for surgery, sedated him, and performed a colonoscopy, where a scope with a camera was inserted into his anus, rectum, colon, and large intestines, and no narcotics were found.
I gotta just say right now, real quick, if I were that guy, I would have just pled guilty, even if there was nothing in me. I would have just been like, "Yep, I'm guilty. There's weed in there. Arrest me." Like, I would just give me the charges. I'll go to jail. I don't want your hands up there all day. Like, God. So anyway, is there more to it, or I mean, could there be more to it?
Well, he protested, and he never consented to any of the procedures. He's now got a lawsuit for $1 million or plus that are going to be, I'm sure that they're going to settle on that at some point. And the thing that's really stupid about it is that it theoretically lacks probable cause, is one of the concerns that people have. Well, I got an idea. How about you never have probable cause to insert, these things into somebody's anus? Well, maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to discuss that as a concept as far as the future of having a free society where you don't have a coercive monopoly running things where you're required to be a participant. First of all, obviously, we wouldn't have drugs being illegal except on people's property, where somebody says, all right, well, if you're going to come onto my property, you're not going to bring drugs with you. Now, at that point, if somebody does trespass onto that person's property carrying drugs, what is the appropriate reaction? Well, through the process of repeat dealings, what you'll see is that the normal procedure would basically be escort the person off the property. So, yeah, if they want to have drugs in their anus somewhere else, that's fine, but not on your property. But all you do is just get them to leave. Okay. Right. But then let's just say, for the sake of argument, that somebody actually potentially is on your property where you got, I don't know, some big sporting event. Let's say you run a Super Bowl type thing. Somebody comes onto the property and is believed to have inserted some sort of explosive into their anus. They've got some, Stargate-level neutron bomb explosive thing that they can stick into their anus. And so you have to find out about it as quickly as possible. This is obviously a very lifeboat scenario, crazy type scenario, but there are potentially a case, there could potentially be a case where, because of the pragmatic choices that you have available to you. The only thing that you can do at this point is to invade the person's anus and check it for this particular explosive device. Okay, that being the case, perhaps that type of thing happens. Maybe it actually does happen, and it does go down that they do the x-rays, they do the finger probes, they do the colonoscopy. At that point, though, the company that is responsible for doing this to this person is culpable. They are the group that is going to be financially responsible for the loss and the damages. And so what happens is that you will see that there's a very big incentive to avoid doing these kinds of things, because the financial penalty to yourself as a company owner is so huge that you don't want to have these types of things go by without really being absolutely certain of what the hell you're doing. So by having the competition in that marketplace of providing services for protection, yes, you may have something like this happen, but number one, the financial penalty that occurs because of a wrong action, such as this, is borne by the people who performed the wrong action, not by the populace as a whole. You know, the money that's going to pay for this guy's lawsuit is going to come out of the citizens of New Mexico. It's not going to come out of the officers' pockets. It's not going to come out of the sergeant or the whoever it is that is owning the police department. You know, the mayor's not going to be paying anything. So that's where you start to see incentives actually produce results, which is how do we actually invent technology that can deal with this type of circumstance that is less invasive and less likely to create a very costly expense as far as a lawsuit. So we have all sorts of technologies that have never been innovated, have never been created because of this monopoly by the state on this process, and the lack of incentives from their not having their costs be borne by themselves. So in a creative environment where you have multiple competing agencies doing the same types of things, we're going to be looking at new innovations where there's going to be new levels of detection, new levels of searching without having it being a violation of a person's body, and so on. So we are missing all the technological advancements. We're missing all the incentives that are appropriate to the interaction, and we're certainly missing any sort of real punishment for the people who actually do the wrong thing. So that's my point on this.
No, I think you kind of, I mean, I'm going to speak for myself. I think you kind of addressed a lot of the moving parts inside that story as relates to how security or the word policing. So I just want to kind of say before we get into everyone else's story that kind of the context of the title of the episode, that police abuse is not a coherent phrase in a free society, is because there would not be police in a free society. That would be my own belief. Not police in the sense that we understand them now. But let's stick to what Robert had with his article. I know Chuck has a question directly for Robert, and then we'll go down the panel and see what everyone else's opinion is on this. Chuck, go ahead.
Was anyone fired for this, Robert? Do you know?
No, nobody's fired. And specifically, the judge that granted the warrant, that judge is absolutely 100% not. There's nothing that can be done to him. He cannot be fired. He cannot be sued. He is completely lacking any potential of loss.
Right. I think we're going to see that in probably a lot of these stories. Chuck, did you have anything else to add or any other questions?
Well, I guess I would point out that I think in a free society, Robert pretty much hit everything on the nail, including the fact that if this had been a free society and this had been a private firm doing this, someone would have been fired. I don't know who, but somebody absolutely would have been fired, because there's no state backing to prop you up just because you work with the state. So I think it was a really good story, Robert, and as usual, you always get a good example of what's going on here. So,
right, Robert definitely provided a lot of the analysis for it. We're going to go down the panel. I want to introduce, we have our surprise guest, Luciander Fien here. Mr. Fien, what's going on? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on here, Randall.
My pleasure, sir. I'm a big Freedom Fiends fan, lowercase f fiend here, looking to bring any fiend I can get on the program, big or little f. Your audio quality is awesome, as would be expected.
Thank you very much. If it's not, Michael will go on a nut and just freak out, and he's very statist about the audio.
He could disconnect you from his house right now if he wanted to, right?
I don't know if he has that type of capability, but I'm entering a little bit late, but it sounds like you're talking about the police brutality and all the other nonsense that goes along with it. I'm going to say that this comes from the broken model of law enforcement, because if you look at the history of law enforcement, it is enforcing laws. It is capturing escaped slaves during the Fugitive Slave Laws, which, by the way, are in Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Magic Piece of Parchment. Mm-hmm. It is going and arresting people on January 1st of 1933 for possession of alcohol and leaving them alone for possession of gold, but on December 31st doing the exact opposite thing. It is keeping black people from going into certain restaurants prior to 64, and then after 64 is forcing those restaurants to serve black people. And the key thing is the use of force. That's what law and force men and women do, is they use force, they follow orders, they follow blindly and obediently.
Well
that
said.
is a problem.
Well said.
Absolutely. I really want to comment on that. One of the things that's critical about the idea of what it is to have policing or security services or whatever it may be, the critical difference between the government doing something and a private agency doing something is the legitimization of that action. I won't fight back, I won't stand up and stop them from doing X, Y, or Z because of their status as being legitimate. If this mythology of legitimacy is gone, people will actually take the appropriate actions necessary to put an end to inappropriate actions. The fact is that all interactions that are going to have a person who does something wrong, does something illegitimate, let's say there is a rapist, okay? This rapist goes off and does his evil deeds, and at some point then you have to use violence in order to obtain this person in some fashion, whether it be, breaking into his home, grabbing him and throwing him into a cage, or whether it be that you just specifically blockade him into his own home and refuse to allow him entrance onto your property for then on out, and then you proceed to go into some sort of trial type of thing. Violence is going to be used, but it's the legitimate use of violence in these types of cases that people can see because they're willing to challenge it if it's not. And if they don't challenge violence that is illegitimate, they let it go on, and that's the state.
Well, let's take it a step further, because when you look at I would get rid of law enforcement completely and replace it with security and protection, because the law enforcement is looking to see who has a lemonade stand without a permit. The law enforcement is looking to see who is drinking raw milk instead of pasteurized milk. The law enforcement is going around collecting revenue and locking people in cages, because that's how they get more revenues, by locking people in cages. Security and protection is busy with ensuring the security and protection of their customers. And we have an organization here in Detroit. It's called Threat Management Center. Cop Block has done videos on them. A friend of mine went out and did an interview. And the areas that they patrol, and they do patrol of residential areas, the crime there is almost non-existent. But they don't go with the typical law enforcement approach. They go with the security and protection approach.
Well, the thing that I would say about that is that when it comes to the law enforcement approach, you're going to have people who have property that they have specific rules that they designate for their property. So if you are going to be on their property and you do something that is not acceptable to them, this is where law enforcement comes in. And so they basically are going to escort you off the property, and you might consider that security, but in essence, it's the same thing. It's law enforcement. You're saying, I do not allow people to come onto my property and I don't know, let's say preach the gospel, because I'm an atheist and I don't believe that we should have anybody trying to convert people on my property. It's my property. I don't want them there. So if somebody comes onto your property and they start to preach the gospel, at that point you have law enforcement come along and escort them off of your property. That's, I mean, like I said, you might call it security, but in essence it's law enforcement.
Or property rights enforcement.
I'm sorry, guys. I just want to jump back in real quick. My computer had a little glitch. I don't know if you guys noticed. I dropped out and I came back. Just catch me up. Where are we at? We still on Kruger's story?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
are.
were. We just had a little back and forth with the question of whether law enforcement or security, I guess he would call it
Security and protection is what he said.
Property rights enforcement. And, I think that property rights enforcement can be shortened as a term to law enforcement. It's just that law enforcement is basically it's an enforcement of a person's property rights, of what their policies are, what their procedures are for their particular location. You might call them referees, but in essence, they're the same kind of thing.
All right. Let me interject there real quick. I want to keep I think a lot of the themes are going to play out throughout all the stories, so I want to keep the stories going too. My take on this real quick is that, to Robert's point, I don't think law enforcement is the right term. I would disagree. And yeah, I know it doesn't really matter necessarily what you call it, but in terms of using words the way we're accustomed to, my problem with law enforcement is that you're talking about a law, and a law, to me, my understanding of a law is something that one person declares as an edict, and that others are expected to follow without their say in the matter or without their recourse in the matter. So I don't think there would be laws per se in a free society. I think there would be individual rules and guidelines for individual locations based on, like you said, property ownership. And I think that, yes, you probably need to come up with a little bit catchier way to describe the service itself. But let's continue on, and I think these themes will come out in the rest of the stories as well. Up next, I want Chuck to talk about his story. Chuck, why don't you go ahead?
All right, so my story comes from freeprojectthought.com, a website a lot of us probably already know. This story was posted on August 7th, so yesterday. In Anatok, in a city called Anatok, there were 8 police officers, I believe, who had this one homeless man handcuffed. And despite the fact that he was handcuffed, they were basically beating the shit out of him, to put it simply. While this man was handcuffed, and I mean already subdued, he was tased. He was hit with nightsticks. He got bit by a dog, by a canine dog, or a canine unit twice, while he's handcuffed, mind you. And eventually they beat him unconscious. And then after that, the police actually started going around and trying to confiscate people's cell phones who actually recorded the incident. And one of the people who they had tried to take her cell phone, she basically managed to get the video online. So, and I believe this was picked up by a local station. I'm not sure where Anatok is. I think it's California. But yeah, so I believe that this is a great example of police brutality for obvious reasons. Literal brutality. So yeah, just to...
Can I ask a clarification question, Chuck?
Sure.
What was the supposed offense of the homeless man? Just being homeless in public?
Okay. There is one problem with this article, and I double-checked it. I might have missed it, but as far as I can tell, the article did not list what he was being subdued for. But whatever it was, I'm sure it wasn't being beaten unconscious and, bitten by a dog twice while he's already handcuffed. Tased while handcuffed. So, but the video's online. I could give you a video of it to post in the description if you want it.
Yeah, I have the link. We'll have the links in the show notes. Actually, I think Mike. Mike put his notes in the chat. I have it up here too. It doesn't say what his supposed crime was, but it does say that there's an eyewitness account that he was kicked in the face 8 times after being handcuffed and pinned to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm
So
guessing that
almost
he
never
was being
face-
arrested for resisting arrest.
Yeah, possibly, and that's something that I always.
It's kind of hard to resist when they beat you unconscious, though. You
I
know,
have a
at
hard
that
time with
point.
that too. I keep on resisting arrest in my daily life as well.
What I read before was that the cops are trained to yell out "stop resisting" because that gives everyone else around them the idea that the person is resisting, and it also gives them plausible rights,
Deniability, yeah.
deniability to keep doing what they're doing on videotape. They know they're on dash cam.
Right.
So they can just take that into court and go, see, he was resisting me, so I'm within my police protocol to do this, even though the guy's probably totally unconscious and he can't move his arms.
But what I would like to re-point out for this story was that afterwards, the cops were trying to confiscate all the footage that people had on them for doing this. So, yeah, I mean.
So I want to jump in and just point out some things, and then I'll let the whole rest of the panel kind of have their take on it. The two things that strike me about this story that Chuck brought forward are one, in a free society, what would be the profit motive of basically beating up a person with no, like, just being a violent, like basically using a homeless person or a poor person as a punching bag. So I just want to illustrate
extremely costly.
In a free society, right? It would ruin your reputation capital to be known as a violent aggressor. It's not even game. I mean, one thing to beat up someone and steal maybe $1 million worth of gold that they had in a briefcase, but to beat up someone and just for kicks in a free society, I think would be kind of silly. And then also to Chuck's point, the need to collect the cell phone footage. I don't want to illustrate a free society point here. I just want to point out that if you were in eyeshot of something happening regarding police activity and you're a voluntarist, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to maybe pull over if you can do it discreetly or get a clear shot of something with your cell phone, because you never know when the next Kelly Thomas case or something like that's going to transpire. And we need witnesses, and we need people who understand that police are actually more often than not violent, because I believe being a police officer, the position itself grants so much protection for violent and aggressive individuals that it's sort of a breeding ground. So I'm sorry, the rest of the panel.
If I can just get on that point 1 second, is if it didn't, if it didn't provide those protections, then the state would have no way to big as scary as they are now to the general populace. So that's something to think about. I mean, that's the facts. But yeah.
What makes me more angry than just the beatings that the cops dish out is the fact that people walk by on the streets witnessing this, and they either stop and they take out their cell phones and record it, or they just keep going about their life like, I'm not going to get involved in this. This is not my business. I just want to go home. This guy must have done something wrong for the cops to be doing this to him. So I'm not going to interject. I'm not going to go to prison. But what good does that do to that person? You're standing around with your cell phone. Okay, great. You can put it on YouTube. You can show everyone what barbaric fascists these people are. But everybody should be on these cops. Like, I seen a video from a soccer event, and some guy ran out into the field, and he was being an idiot. And these cops caught him, and they started beating him with clubs on the ground. Well, 2 or 3 or 4 people ran up and kicked the police officers, and they ganged up on him. And the police officers, their authority went poof, and they ran away like cowards. Why can't that happen here?
I think the problem with that is that look at how society is trained today. We're trained to basically go to a cop and say, "Oh, thank you for your service," and in doing so, the society has been trained to believe that the cop is always right. And as you pointed out, that he probably did something to deserve it. And on top of that, even if the person didn't think the guy deserved it, look what would have happened to him probably that bystander, if they had jumped in to help the guy. He would have been beaten up too. He would have been tased, and he would have been bitten by the same dog, and he would have been probably thrown in the exact same set of cages that the homeless man was thrown into, and that would have created another victim. And as sad as it is, you're right. Something should have been done to help this man, but at the same time, I could understand from a state's point of view in levels of intimidation You get what I'm saying with this, right? I mean, there's such an intimidation level that I honestly think that people even who don't agree with the cops would just be too scared.
Well, one of the things that is part of the problem is the fact that the United States has a certain amount of, I don't know, it's a lack of wanting to be involved in conflict, and I think it comes a lot from the British, cultural norm, which is to avoid conflict. They don't like this idea of conflict, so. What we're seeing in foreign countries, some South American countries, is if the police officers start to go into their abusive mode, and there's a bunch of people around, they're going to tackle that police officer. In fact, they may actually hang that police officer, and so the police officer has an incentive not to go overboard. It is certainly a cultural norm within the United States to be a little bit more passive when it comes to things that are conflict oriented. I think that there's been hundreds of different videos that I've seen where you've got police officers who are instigating some issue in like a subway, and you've got 4,500 people, 45 to 100 people that are around there, that if they actually were willing to engage in conflict, willing to assert that this is wrong, that they would have jumped on that guy and those police officers and put an end to it.
Yeah, that's not going to happen because we have the state, because we have a violent monopoly on the use of protection services in a society.
It's the cultural norm, though. It's the cultural norm.
Well, but I'm pointing out is because when you have only one option in a marketplace, people can't imagine alternatives. One of the alternatives to the police would be self-defense. So I'm just agreeing with you that insofar as that because there's a monopoly, people aren't looking that way. Lusander, I want your take on this.
Yeah, being in the failed state project of Detroit, there's a lot of stories that have been out about homeowners shooting home invaders. And
like that one guy that just got convicted. I live in Detroit too. So.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Hey, nice to meet you, Chuck.
Nice to meet you.
Which guy got convicted?
The guy who shot the girl at his porch.
Okay.
With the shotgun. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, through the door. Not exactly a real home invader, I don't suspect.
But the point is that similar cases have happened, and what's interesting about that was, even the Detroit police chief was encouraging citizens to get guns. So now the media is basically dumping all this other stuff to contradict him. So.
But in Detroit, I'm judged by 12 or carried by 6, and that's been happening quite a bit. But what's really interesting is, Americans are domesticated house pets when it comes to the shiny badge and the funny costume, and they do just bow down, especially if they got a bunch of ribbons on there, which I call plumage. But what's happening is people they're looking the other way from that. And when you look at groups like Cop Block, Cop Block is bringing this to the awareness. It's so bad that Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly had to go on and state bait and talk about how much we need police and how much they protect us and all this other crap. There was just an anti-Cop Block page that went up on FaceSpace, and that made it up to 407 likes. It was up for a couple days, and it got taken down. I suspect that it had something to do with the backlash. I know because I personally gave them some of that backlash. But there's also a story not too long ago, I think it was in Philadelphia, on a train platform. One of the transit cops or something like that was just getting the living hell beat out of them, and of course people took out their cameras and they photographed it, but nobody jumped in to save the cop. And even on Glenn Beck's website, The Blaze, most of the comments on there were talking about how cops are being thugs, and there wasn't a whole lot of support for the cops. And Glenn Beck's website, that's where you expect to see the cop worship and the rampant statism. It's not there anymore.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the support for the police state is going away, and all the different articles, the Free Thought Project, everything that they put out there, they're darn near mainstream news as far as their coverage and the amount of sharing that they get on Facebook and Twitter and all these other places. It's a main staple of people's daily visits now.
Well, it's a really good thing if we have a society that's actually willing to, I don't know, kind of just look away when the police officer is being beaten. It's a step in the right direction, I think. I know that I personally do not want to see a person, experience the amount of physical violence that is going on in these types of situations. But quite frankly, if they are the aggressor, they deserve to have some sort of violence done to them. And so, when I hear a story about these people beating the crap out of a cop and nobody lifted a finger, well, good. I actually kind of like that. I think that that's a step in the right direction. I would like to see more peaceful means to do that, and to that end, I'm actually looking at creating an app and a website that will enable people to quickly look at who it is that they're serving in their businesses, as to whether they're participants in these types of violent activities like police officers are or legislators are, and they can very quickly learn, hey, you know what, this is the bad shit this guy's done, so I'm going to escort them off my premises and keep them out of my business because I don't want to serve a person who is going to be as cruel and evil as these people are. So I think that if we can create a network where people are essentially not just shaming but ostracizing, specifically, causing a problem to occur for the bad guys, legislators, police officers, and so on, we'll see a lot of improvement in the performance that they provide. But I think it's critical to send a message to the police officers that if you're going to be a bad person, if you're going to be doing these bad things, that there will be consequences, and they may not be actually getting accosted and beaten up, but there will be consequences associated with it. I would really like to see that become a forefront in our fight against the oppression that we have today.
I agree. I agree 100%. I don't want to see cops get beat up, but sometimes while I'm watching these videos, I really believe that these cops could use a really good wood shampoo. Isn't that what they call it? The wood shampoo?
Wood shampoo.
When I see that guy get arrested in, I think it was New Hampshire or someplace, he went over the 2-minute talking limit, and the cop escorted him out and put the bracelets on him. There was a guy that just recently got arrested for asking the city council to speak up because they weren't using their microphones to discuss a hot topic, and he got arrested for it. I'm always shocked when I don't see the people in that audience stand up and say, "No, you're not taking him." Where's that Solzhenitsyn moment?
Well, I as much as I love your application, Kruger, I think the problem is society's not ready for it. I mean, when you think about, remember, I believe it was in Portland, that one coffee shop owner who told the cop to get off his property? Remember how much backlash that guy got? I mean, it was crazy. If anyone doesn't remember, there was a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon. A police officer walked in, and the owner told the cop, and he said, "You're making my customers feel uncomfortable. I would like you to leave." And then, the news went and started interviewing people, and one of the clips that stuck out to me was this woman saying, "Oh my God, it totally dehumanized the officer, and because they're people too." And, nobody should be kicked out of a coffee shop like that, completely ignoring the fact that it was his property and he has the right to let in and let out whoever he wants. And, later at that time, someone was having an overdose in one of his bathrooms, and he called 911 and said, "Can you send an ambulance, but don't send any cops because they're not allowed on my premises." And I was just like, but I mean, that guy, when he kicked out that cop, he took so much media black.
I would just want to interject real quick, Chuck, for the audience sake. We don't recommend you calling. This is just from my perspective as a host. I wouldn't recommend anyone calling emergency services for medical care and then say anything about cops. If you don't want cops to show up your house, better off to just say, we just need an ambulance only. But if you say don't send cops, my guess is in many places they will send.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be willing to bet that that woman went to 12 years of the state indoctrination camps that was defending the cop and saying that he was dehumanized. It's just a guess.
And to that woman, who said that cops are people too. The Nazis were people too.
Yeah. And so were the Armenians who were getting killed, but no one seemed to care about that either during that genocide, right?
Yeah.
You know.
Of course, the bad guys that we always like to point out, that it creates, that well, you lose the argument as soon as you bring up the Nazis. All right, fine, the Khmer Rouge, all right, they were people too, so let's just not be mean to them, because that's just not nice. Come on, if somebody's a dick, you treat them like a dick, which means you ostracize them, you keep them out of your business, you keep them out of your life, you kick them to the curb. That's the way it's done. And so when it comes to this guy who's getting a lot of backlash, well, hell, you know what? We should probably be doing a campaign to get people to go to his place. Support this man for being an outstanding citizen who actually says, I will not have police officers who are essentially thugs entering my restaurant or coffee shop or whatever the hell it is. Let's give him some love. Let's give him some support. Start a campaign that actually pushes for people to go to his store and buy his products to give him some sort of incentive to continue being the righteous citizen that he is.
I'm waiting for the moment when the state fakes a robbery at his place, and then they laugh at him like, well, he didn't call the cops, so they'll do it. You know how they are. They're petty. Similar things have been done. We just, we probably don't know about it. But yeah, I think going back to the original story, I think that what we need to realize is that yes, that man should have been helped, but we also kind of have to understand it from a statist point of view why he wasn't helped, and we have to understand the Portland situation, why they backlashed him. It's because as Lausander pointed out, I'm sorry, I pronounced your name wrong. That's sorry, but as he pointed out, that the people are trained for so long to worship the state as a whole that we need websites like CopBlock to promote that these are people too, and they can be just as bad as people are normal people. So how do we keep doing that? How do we push that image farther?
We let them do it for us. The reason that CopBlock exists, the reason that the Free Thought Project exists, the reason that we are libertarians, anarchists, abolitionists, whatever you want to call us, is because the state is violent and aggressive. If these people were acting gentlemanly and they were actually peace officers instead of law enforcement men and women, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be talking about fishing or how to bake the best biscuits in a Dutch oven over a campfire. But no, we're talking about cop violence because that's what the system does. And the cops didn't go bad. They went the only way that they possibly could. It's inherent to the model of law enforcement men and women.
Mike, you've been awfully quiet about this. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the same thing. I think my thought process is the same thing as everyone else's in this chat. I mean, I don't know. I personally don't have a real opinion on it, except for I share what you guys are saying.
Well, one of the things that was interesting is that recently there has been an app that has been put together by, I think it's peacekeeper.org. Yeah, that's right.
Peacekeeper. By Cody?
Yeah, and this particular concept is one of the best ways that we can look at getting rid of the state is by creating alternatives to what the state offers that actually achieve the results that we want with less of what we don't want. And they provide the opportunity for you to notify people who are in your network that you're in need in a fire situation, in an abduction situation, in all sorts of different situations where you might need some help that would be, I don't know, policing or medical care or fire assistance and so on, and you don't have to be dependent upon the state in order to receive some sort of assistance if you need some. And I think that what we really should be doing is, number one, creating alternatives like Peacekeeper, but number two, creating a smear campaign, an ad campaign that shows the stupidity, the absolute pathetic, horrible the lack of effectiveness that the government provides when it comes to these different services that they're supposed to be doing. If we show how bad and how stupid it is, I mean, I'm trying to do an ad campaign that shows, you go into a situation where you're going to buy some beer, and it's $11.59. You get that beer just fine. It's $12.01. Now you've got a police officer breathing down your neck with a gun. This is absolutely stupid. Okay, so the idea of providing protection from whatever bad guys that are out there, and if we can do it in an alternative way, and then we can show how incredibly inefficient and lacking of any capability the state is doing, and we can make a marketing campaign that shows these two, the dichotomy of, this is effective, this doesn't use the state, this is ineffective, it is the state. Yeah. That is going to cause people to change their mindset.
It's going to take a while, though, but I agree with you because, look at how many smear campaigns the fake politicians throw at each other and people still abide by their party. So we're going to have a lot of work to do. And but you know what? I think it can be done. It's just going to take time.
I think it is happening because a lot of people, the common average everyday person who doesn't get into the political stuff, that's not part of the parties and the campaigns, and doesn't see that all this double dealing is going on, to them it's at a distance. But when you're looking at the average person driving down the road that gets road pirated, they see that. When they get harassed and some cop wants to inspect their car looking for drugs, and it's a little old lady or something like that hasn't used weed since the 60s, and she's getting harassed, when it's a code enforcement coming around saying your grass is a centimeter too long, yeah, that's the smear campaign. It's them doing the work for us. And really, when you look at alternatives, Detroit is popping up with a lot of alternatives. Chuck, I'm sure that you're familiar with a lot of the stuff that's going on. They're not libertarians or anarchists, but they sure as hell are acting like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Chuck.
Yep. No, I was just agreeing with him. I know exactly what he was talking about, and it's great that, and especially in Detroit, you never think you'd hear about it, but people are actually starting to stick up for themselves, which is kind of the whole idea for voluntarism. So it's great, and this is a good trend, and I hope it continues because Detroit really needs it, if anything.
Yeah, and the more that the more help that Detroit gets, the worse things get.
Mm-hmm.
So
every time.
Everybody is giving up on the myth of the state. The curtain is pulled back, and you don't see a great God. You just see the ghost of Coleman Young or whatever politician that you want to call, and it just keeps getting worse.
Remember when everyone actually loved Kwame? Like,
yeah, that was kind of funny.
Yeah, so Detroit for you.
But he was a hip hop mayor.
Who here has not told their story yet? Mike, did you tell yours?
No, I haven't.
Go ahead, man. I just want, because we're running out of time. I want to get everyone's in.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the Kelly Thomas incident that happened a couple of years ago, and it was obviously the first thing that came to mind when I was asked to join the show, because this is the story that really sticks out for me the most, because it really shows you the extent of the violence that cops will literally go through and actually get away with it in court with video evidence, where if it was anybody else, they'd be thrown in prison for 25 years to life.
And not only that, they'd be vilified by the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So
go ahead. All right. So Kelly Thomas was a homeless man diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he lived on the streets of Fullerton, California. And a report came into the police department from a slide bar where someone was vandalizing cars near the Fullerton Transportation Center. So the cops show up and they investigate, and they see Thomas. He didn't have a shirt on, and he looked like he was walking around erratically. And so they approached him. They sat him down on the curb, and they were basically harassing him. And one of the cops waving his fist in his face, threatening to beat him with his fists. And so, according to the video, I'm sure everyone has seen it, Thomas basically got sick of the crap and said, you know what, I'm not going to sit here and deal with this. I'm just going to peacefully get up and walk away. He was unarmed. He didn't pose any threats. He didn't make any threatening motions towards the cop. He just got up and just said, I'm leaving. And the cops got out their nightsticks and they chased after him. They tackled him. They beat him over the head with their nightsticks, and more cops showed up and tased him repeatedly, bashed his head in with the handle of the gun, with the handle of the taser. Sorry, and all this time he's screaming that he can't breathe. He's screaming out for his father. He's apologizing over and over and over. By the time they got done with this, he's lying motionless in his own blood, and the cops are fist bumping and high-fiving and, oh, look at the scrape that I got on my elbow. So the cops got brought up on charges, after he died in a hospital from a coma 5 days later. They got brought up on charges. I'll read them off here. Officer Manuel Ramos, Jay Cicinelli, and Joseph Wolf were charged. Second-degree murder went to Manuel Ramos. Involuntary manslaughter went to Ramos, Jay Cicinelli, Joseph Wolf, and excessive force went to Cicinelli and Wolf. And even with video evidence, all the prosecutor had to do was they were within police protocol, and they were doing what their job told them to do. And 12 spineless bastards sitting on the jury didn't have the guts or the moral code to see past that magical costume and that shiny badge and said what you did was immoral, reprehensible, and wrong. You committed murder on a homeless person, because after all, he's homeless. Nobody's going to miss him. And they dropped all charges. They found him not guilty, and these men walk free.
I want to jump in real quick, Mike. I think it's really what you just said kind of gave me a thought. I think it's really ironic how we have a supposed democratic leadership from the Democratic Party representative running the country, so to speak, supposedly. And all the Democrats historically are really pro the poor and helping the homeless and helping out the least among us. And, isn't that the point of all this big government, is that we have a safety net for people, and that, the poor and the sick among us get the care and all the, attention they need. Meanwhile, we have cops literally just basically murdering like SS style, like Nazi style, just might as well just pull out your gun and just bullet point right through the head. At least, take him out quick instead of giving him a 4 or 5 day coma. Just point blank the guy. You don't like homeless men? Just shoot the guy. You have a badge on. It shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't be really in trouble for it. You're protected by
your badge, yeah. And, I think what he also, what you said about the jury, I don't think they thought they were spineless. I think that they truly thought that they were doing the right thing because they were protecting the state. And you know how, statists get about the state. We got to protect it at all costs. So I honestly believe that they thought they were doing the right thing by keeping those good officers on their job. Good. you know.
One of the things that I think is critical that we admit or at least acknowledge when we're talking about an anarchist system, a free market capitalist system where people are actually, providing the service of protection and security and so on. I would say policing or law enforcement, but some people might disagree with that term. Regardless, when you have this type of a society, bad things will happen still. There will be people who will be bad actors, and there will be police officers, security firm, representatives who will go ahead and take things too far. They will go ahead and kill somebody inappropriately. This will happen. What we are talking about is how the incentives work. What are the results of these bad actions? We don't believe in some sort of utopian view that there will not be crime in this perfect voluntarist society. There will be crime, there will be bad actors, and there will be problems. But the incentives that are associated with these actions are appropriate for achieving an end to them eventually. It takes time. You have to actually have repeat dealings with these encounters where you see that, hey, you know what, if you are a person who does stuff like accosts a homeless person, a vagrant who trespasses, do you actually kill that person outright? Is this an appropriate response? Theoretically, yes, you could outright just murder somebody for trespassing because you don't know what their danger is to you, how much of a danger they pose, are they armed, whatever. And what happens is that you create a market for having solutions, and having solutions that achieve a result where your property is still protected, but the other person is not so drastically harmed, is what is the result. Because of competing interests, where people are trying to avoid the negative problems of having just been an outright murderer and the positive result of having a person who is a vagrant no longer on your property trespassing. So we don't have a utopia. We have a solution that provides better incentives. That's all that we're talking about.
And we're not looking for a utopia. We're just looking for a way that we don't have the state telling us who we can be and who we can't be and throwing rules at us all the time. I mean, like, we're not looking for this utopia that everyone else seems to think that the state can provide. Because if there was a utopia, if a utopia could possibly actually be done, we'd probably be a lot closer to it by now. There's no way that a utopia could happen, especially a state-driven utopia. So that's my take on what he said about utopias.
Randall, as far as your thought on the Democrats being about civil rights, cops serve the state. When you think of domestic tyranny, think of cops, because they're the ones that make it all possible.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I don't know if my levels are coming through to you guys. Oh, there we go. I agree with you on that. I just want to point out the hypocrisy for the Democrats who, voted for Obama and are happy with their choices as of right now. That, you're supposedly
They're not.
Well, no, I know there are a few. I mean, there are people out there who still think Obama's a great president. I hate to say it, but it's a fact. I mean, I've met them. There are people out there.
They're starting to become the small minority.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Even in Detroit.
Yeah, except then they say, well, Mitt Romney should have been president. So they're still looking within the realm of the state running itself. So, I mean, yes, there's a lot of people saying, I don't like Obama as a president, but then those very same people are like, my candidate that I'm partied with would do a good job. So
even that's dwindling away, slowly but surely.
10,000 years of history has proven that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lucinda, you and I were at PorcFest this past June. My question to you is, how many more years will PorcFest go through its motions before cops raid that campground?
It's really interesting with the coverage that PorcFest is getting and with the growth of it. And when you look at Obama's, they're going to tell you that there's tyranny around every corner speech. Look at Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly with their "Cop Block is Bad" segment. They're standing up and they're trying to disparage the ideas of liberty. And once liberty gets so big that disparagement doesn't work anymore, they're going to go in there and they're going to start knocking heads and giving out wood shampoos. Will it happen next year? I don't know. Will it happen in 2 weeks at the event that I'm an organizer at? I hope not, but and eventually they're going to respond the way that they respond. I personally think the best way is for a rapid growth of the liberty movement, even if people don't realize they're part of the liberty movement. But to stop participating in elections, but more importantly, stop participating in election results. Leave the state. So I can't tell you when.
Isn't it also ironic that, these same people talk about how bad cop block is, but then they go around and say, well, Hamas is a threat to Israeli freedom. And, gee, thanks. You're so helpful, media.
My desire for consistency is what led me away from statism. I used to be a neocon.
So
so did I.
I've actually served in the military, so that doesn't make me the typical neocon, because most of them were a bunch of chicken hawks that just screamed, yeah, you go over there and kill them while I watch.
I don't know why that was a pretty good impression of a neocon.
It's the way that Lou puts things, man. It's so eloquent and succinct.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we're running out of time on the show. I did want to address a point that Lusander said. I must disagree with the idea that voting is a bad thing. I believe that every single person who is an anarchist should vote against every single proposition for taxation, every single proposition for additional spending, every single proposition for a increase in governance, whether it be making something illegal, whatever it may be. I also believe that voting for a representative who is, for example, like in the next presidential election, if we can get Adam Kokesh on the ballot, then that, or writing in Adam Kokesh, this sends a message to the rest of the population that yes, there are people who actually have opinions that are different than their own, and they should actually check them out and see what the hell they're talking about. I think that the Ron Paul experience was an amazing asset to the freedom movement, and if we actually can achieve something on par with the Ron Paul type of thing, then that's what we want to see in the future. So I don't think that voting is necessarily wrong. Obviously, voting for the Republican or the Democrat, just because they're a Republican or a Democrat, is absolutely idiocy. Absolute idiocy. I think that what's that? Julie Borowski, I think it is.
Yeah.
Her support for the Republican candidate or whatever it may be is completely erroneous. She's wrong, but I think that there are certain cases where voting is absolutely a good thing for us to do, and specifically trying to get numbers that are of a huge amount. If we can actually show that we're not just some fringe group that doesn't have any sort of voice, that doesn't have any sort of cohesion, is a bad thing. And by being able to come behind a person in some form, whether it be Adam Kokesh or
Robert,
some other anarchist, is a good thing.
let me jump in with the counterpoint, because I didn't hear what happened before, and I don't know how much time my computer's going to let me have, but I disagree with you respectfully. Yes, me as well with Lou. I think that by voting in numbers or not, we're sending the wrong message, not only to the rest of the public, but we're sending the wrong message to the rest of the voluntarists that voting or that the political process can serve us in some positive way. It cannot. There's nothing but a vermin or a parasite on us, and we should not pretend that it can serve us any positive function. I'll keep it short and sweet. That's how I feel. Rest of the panel, though, everyone else has used. Chuck, Mike.
I don't personally demonize anybody who wants to run for any kind of political office, and like a Ron Paul figure. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Ron Paul. And if by some unbelievable biblical miracle he were to win the White House, he would be
assassinated.
Yeah, he would be probably the greatest slave master of our time. He would maybe whip me once a year, not every single day. But I would be no closer to freedom with Ron Paul in the White House than I would with Mitt Romney.
Yeah, but it's not you too. It's not just you. You know, there's other people that are involved here, and Ron Paul specifically said that he would pardon people who were convicted of nonviolent crimes, for example. So, are you saying that, well, just because it won't help me, I shouldn't actually make this happen for freedom for the people who have been violently imprisoned for doing nothing other than, voluntary free trade? I get where you're coming from, that you think that it can't do anything at all, but it's, number one, a great marketing tool. Number two, it actually can have concrete results, which results in more liberty for certain people. So I just don't see.
I 100% agree with you on that point. That
I disagree.
Ron Paul did more to push. Ironically, he served in government office and he did all this kind of government rituals, but he pushed more people towards anarchy than anyone that I can really think of. And
I disagree.
And that's fine. I like Ron Paul. I have nothing bad to say about him. I think he's a moral man. I think he's. I think everything he does is good intention. I know what they say about good intentions. But I'm just saying, just him sitting in that White House implies that he is in fact ruling over me and everybody else. But I think Ron Paul ran knowing that he wouldn't win. I think he ran on the platform that he's going to spread his message to a wider audience, and it worked. That's why I don't demonize people who do run for political office to spread the message of freedom. I just try to get people to understand that we can achieve freedom also through voluntary cooperation, peaceful means, without government.
Did Chuck
I'll admit it. I was just going to say, I'll admit, Ron Paul was the one who pushed me to anarchy. I mean, that might sound weird that a politician pushed me to anarchy, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. It's just like I heard Ron Paul.
Let me interject you real quick, because we're talking about a problem of causation. I have a little bit of a philosophy background, so I don't mean to take it off the course of liberty. But for you to say that Ron Paul caused you to find anarchy or took you to anarchy,
well,
there's obviously a chain there. So he was one of the links, just like he was one of the major
so let
links
me go through the full chain then.
Would you have gotten to? My question is, would you have gotten to anarchy without the help of Rothbard and Mises and maybe Lysander Fien or whoever it was that you followed, whether it was Bad Quaker?
Well, you know what? I'm gonna actually have to say no, and I'll tell you why. I heard about Ron Paul before I ever heard about any of the great anarcho-capitalists or minarchists.
Same here.
I heard about him first. They never taught me about any of those other people in the state. I mean, if I hadn't found Ron Paul, I might have heard of Friedrich Nietzsche in my philosophy class.
That wasn't my question, Chuck. I'm clear. I'm not saying was Ron Paul not the first one, or was he not the one that was
would I
most
have gone there
influential?
eventually?
Would you have made it all the way to anarchy on Ron Paul alone, or did you not need true voluntarists, true anarchists to take you the rest of the way?
Ron Paul took me to libertarianism. I will state that. And then I started looking into libertarianism, and then I started looking into minarchism, and then I started looking into anarchy after that. So I honestly can't give you an answer to your question as the way you worded it.
Can I jump in here, Randall?
Sure thing, Lou. Go ahead.
Ron Paul carries a message. He's carried the same message since he first went to Congress in the 70s. Outside of terms of the times, it hasn't changed a single bit. He was ignored in the 70s. He was ignored in the 80s. He was largely ignored in the 90s. But in 2008, using the same message that he's used for all those years, people finally started listening to him, and they listened to him even more in 2012. Ron Paul may have carried the message of liberty, but George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, and every last one of them brought the demand for liberty. None of us left statism because everything was just fine. Everything was not hunky-dory. We left statism because statism is wrong. And if you're going to vote, let's say you do get an Adam Kokesh, and then let's say you do get a Ron Paul, and he doesn't get assassinated, and he's actually able to make some reforms. He makes the state a little bit more palatable, a little bit more tolerable. He prolongs the life of the state. If you're going to vote, vote for more taxes, vote for more government, vote for Hillary. Give people the democracy they want, and give it to them good and hard.
Right,
Okay,
and I think it's going to happen. Real quick, because my computer's going to kick me off again. I think that's going to happen anyway. So it doesn't matter if you vote for Hillary or if you vote for Adam Kokesh, because whether we have 0.0008% of the vote or 0.006% of the vote or 0.02% of the vote, whether it's that small, I think Robert, you might be being a little bit unrealistic with the size of our numbers. We're probably less than 0.1% of the population in terms of being philosophical voluntarists.
It is small.
So shouldn't we be concise with our message that we want to avoid and reject the state at all angles instead of having this mixed message?
No, okay. Now, first of all, Ron Paul had a ability to point out the problems that would occur and predict the future. I mean, he actually predicted the housing crash, and because of that, he was listened to more so than others. And the fact that he was specifically maligned, or not maligned, but put to the side when it came to the process of who can appear in a debate, of who is going to be put forward as the nomination in our particular county and whatever. What it does is it shows all the flaws within the system when you actually have this type of person. Now, one thing that's critical about this is that, number one, I'm never expecting that we will actually get a candidate into office. Okay, that's just not going to happen. We're not going to get a candidate into office. But by specifically, saying no, we will not participate at all, then the question comes: how does the society around us become aware that we even exist?
Podcast.
Yeah, you know what? How many views do you get on your videos? Okay,
Well,
and how many of them are?
I average about 100. I just want to put that out there.
I would say me and
How
Chuck
many of them are
combined.
preaching to the converted?
How do they become aware that we exist? Yeah, it is going to be podcasts. It's going to be going out and talking to people. It's going to be interaction with people and saying, hey, stuff's a little bit messed up. You notice that? Hey, maybe we need something a little bit better. But the real proof is going to be when you look at a city like Detroit that is falling apart, that has had statism after statism after statism, and it's only gotten worse. And people are actually starting to take responsibility for their own actions. It's just like heroin addiction. The addict doesn't decide to get sober when they're riding high. When you're snorting cocaine off of a stripper's butt, you don't check into rehab. It's when you wake up in an abandoned house with a tranny hooker shooting crocodile that you go into rehab.
Lou, I love you, man.
Okay, I completely
Chuck's
agree
got to run.
with that
I'm going to
point.
throw to Chuck real quick. Chuck's got to run. He wants to say goodbye.
Hey, Randall, thank you so much for having me on the show. I think that this episode really brought the point home. And sorry again to my normal viewers who might be watching. Sorry, I don't have a show tonight. I got personal shit I got to deal with. But Randall, as always, you've been so great to me. Robert, Mike, Lou, you guys have just been totally awesome. I will check you guys out next Friday from 9 to 9:30 on Liberty Geek on the Voluntary Virtues Network. And until then, see you later, guys.
Bye, Chuck.
Peace out.
Later, Chuck.
All right, who was next? Krug, you had a comment? Or?
Well, I just wanted to make this point clear. That yes, I understand that we have to have the shit hit the fan in order for people to actually get off their asses and do something. People don't act unless they feel that they're in imminent danger. Their willingness to just be satisfied or satiated by the existence that they have is well within the norm for human beings. Human beings are very, very comfortable with just getting along and moving and just going. If as long as I can watch my Sunday night football, as long as I can have my beer, my 12-pack, I don't really care. I just don't want to have to deal with that shit. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I agree with you in that regard, and so I am in favor of every single voluntarist of taking advantage of every single social program they can possibly take advantage of. You know, get as much money as you can out of the system, tax the hell out of it as much as possible, and yes, definitely see the we want to see the Barack Obamas and the Hillary Clintons run the shit. We want them to run it into the ground, absolutely, definitely. And we want to create alternatives that provide solutions instead of, you know, whatever. But when it comes to actually, like, having a message that can be heard, you know, in your own particular neck of the woods, Lusander, you've got people who are living in Detroit, Michigan, where they've had the state just run into the ground. There are properties there that sell for $5. Okay,
Yeah.
and this is a result of governance just gone crazy bad. Okay, and the only reason why people are willing to sell their property for $5 is so they can get out of the thumb of the property taxes that they're paying. You know, so that they don't have to pay the property taxes. That's the whole reason why they're selling them for $5. Okay.
Half the city's not paying their property taxes now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cops and the bad police enforcement that you guys have had is absolutely, without a doubt, incredible. But you yourself have said that there are people who are going through the motions of doing all these different things that are essentially anarchists. But they're not anarchists. They are not philosophical anarchists. They don't even have a clue as to the fact that their actions are anarchist actions. Okay? They don't get it. Well, why don't they get it? Because they don't know the message is out there. And in order to get the message out there, there are very few models by which you can actually achieve a message delivery system that is as broad and wide-reaching as you can with a political campaign. Now, perhaps if you would like to instead go down the route of a religious group, and you know, going along and finding a person who is of a religiously significant name, you know, somebody who is a big name in the Christian community, considering the United States is primarily Christian when it comes to religion, then yeah, you can maybe spread that message that way. And being an atheist, I find that abhorrent, but you know, I would be willing to go freaking down that road. But the point is it's about effectiveness, not about the philosophical, like, you know, I understand where you're coming from, but you have to see that if you don't actually get feet on the ground, you can't achieve what it is that you're talking about. And the ways that you can do that, yes, I understand that there's, you know, you can go into yoga classes and you can go into people who are doing home farms and so on, and making their own food and things like that. You can create alternatives that way, and you can integrate yourself with all sorts of different communities by being a person who actually gets out there and involves yourself. But it's nothing compared to the political process or the religious process in the United States. There are other
Same
countries
difference.
where, you know, yeah, it's the same. It's the same deal. It's just lies and oppression. But regardless, if you're going to try to reach a very massive audience where you can actually, like, you know, one of the things that's critical about advertising is that you're going to have a wide net that you have to throw over everything, and then you're going to catch a few fish, and there's going to be a bunch of them that are going to get away. Yep. And the best way to create the advertising that we're talking about, that we're going for, is going to be one of two ways. It's going to be through religion, or it's going to be through politics. And as far as spreading the message, I cannot discount, I can't believe that anyone can discount the number of people who were turned on to the message of liberty by the Ron Paul campaign.
Can I just? I want to throw to Lou. Robert, quick question, direct question. Can we not have one person like Adam Kokesh run like a Ron Paul without any of us actually going to vote? I mean, wouldn't it be more of a statement if he got 0 votes but still had the platform?
No, not at all. It's far better if he gets a ton of votes. If he gets a crap ton of votes. I mean, He needs to get as many votes.
It's not going to happen, though. It's just realistically, there's no possible
No, it's not
way.
going to happen with people like you preaching against voting.
No, Robert, I'm a realist. I know how to do math. If you add up the population, you do the math, you do a census, you do a poll, you collect. It doesn't matter. It's not a statist census. I'm saying if you just did if you had a way of beaming into the hearts of every single soul in America and find out who of them would in a year's time be able to awaken enough to vote for someone like an Adam Kokesh, even if they're not there now, if we spend all the time trying to convince them to get them on board, look into their hearts, and if you could have a magic machine that could show that, you would see that maybe, let's see, how many people will vote? 40 million people. Okay, so we'll probably, if we could rustle up 50,000 people, what is the difference between 25,000, 50,000, or 100,000 to you?
Okay, well, if the numbers are marginal, like, let's say, 0.001% versus 0.002%, it's irrelevant, right?
Sure.
But the idea that if it's 1% versus 6% is not. Okay? I understand where you're coming from, and I would say this, is that you have to start somewhere.
Well, real quick, you explain your position a lot. I just want to ask you a few direct questions because I disagree, and I want to get this out there. It's a nice conversation. We got 2 more minutes, 5 more minutes. If your viewpoint's correct, and we got the 8% of votes or whatever it was for Kokesh, and we got the message out there, wouldn't we have kind of just played into their game? Wouldn't it be to the extent to where people could say, well, you had you guys.
Okay. Well, wouldn't it be this opportunity for the statists to say, well, you had your chance, and obviously it wasn't what, nobody really bought into it. You got your day in the sun, and it was lost. Yeah, the statists can say that when it comes to elections. Sure. Okay, fine. So what? Who fucking cares? The point is that you've got actually people putting into Google voluntarism, and you've got people putting into Google Adam Kokesh or whoever it is that we end up putting up forward, and you actually have people checking it out and getting information about it and understanding more about it. Okay? It's not a we can win here solution. It is a progressive solution that says, all right, what we need to do is we need to spread the message. We need to get the seeds of thought, in their minds and actually have them questioning things and asking those questions. And once they are asking those questions, can they find the truth? Can they actually get some real understanding of economics, maybe? The idea that one of the things that's critical about Ron Paul's campaign that was really so effective is that he also had Peter Schiff on the side, kind of like, spinning the story, the truth about the economics. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it may not work right then, but when it comes to it, we're bringing more people to thinking about what it is that we're talking about. And one of the bottom line facts about movements like what we have here is that we start from a base mindset, a base understanding of people who tend to be fairly socially inept. And this happens in all different types of movements. If you look at the homosexual crowd, the movement of homosexuality across America, you could see that there's absolutely a complete lack of connection between the big proponents of homosexual rights in the world. They just didn't get how to communicate with other people. It was very just doing parades where you're dressing up in crazy ass clothes and thinking that's going to help your cause.
It's a marketing issue. I know
it
you're
really
saying.
Work very well. And the same thing happens with atheists. Atheists get a lot of people who are very, very angry sounding and bitter sounding and horrible, horrible sounding people. Okay, the same thing even happened with the abolitionist movement when it came to providing rights for the blacks. We have when you have a movement that is about freedom and about understanding of people's innate self-ownership, whether it be slavery, blacks, homosexuals, atheists, all these different groups, every single one of them, you get the marginally inept people who don't know how to freaking communicate very well. Okay, and then you start to spread it to people who know how to communicate better. and then you continue to spread it. And the more people that we reach, the faster that we reach them, the better that we will be able to actually spread the message of liberty and actually cause a growth and a change. And I understand that, you know, causing a crash creates more fruit, more fertile ground for that message to be received, but it doesn't mean that we have to give up on the other thing either.
All right, well, let me jump in, Robert. I do appreciate your viewpoint. I don't want to challenge you back again. I think that we had a really nice back and forth, and I think the viewers will have a chance to play these ideas out a little bit more. I want to give the other two guests a shot to give their final thoughts. We'll go to Mike and then Lou.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think if you look at the Ron Paul campaign when he ran for the Libertarian Party in '88, nobody gave him the time of day. I think he went just trying to get his name on nationwide ballots. Because the people in the '80s, things were not bad enough for them to listen to what Ron Paul was actually saying. Fast forward to 2008. People were getting sick of the Iraq War. People were getting sick of the Afghan War. You know, people were getting sick of the status quo. They still wanted government, but they were getting sick of the status quo. Along comes Ron Paul, and he makes an unbelievable showing in South Carolina, refusing to back down to Giuliani, and people said, wow, this guy's for real. Go to 2012, more people started listening to him. I think the viewpoint of Lusanda, as far as, you know what, make things as worse as fucking possible, raise taxes to 100%, make people so angry that they give up this status quo belief and start taking on some other options. I think that if we're going to take your approach, Robert, and say, okay, taking Adam Kokesh in 2020, you know, it would be unbelievable timing for Kokesh to run and win if, you know, things were just so incredibly bad. People say, I can't live in this system anymore. I can't, you know, libertarians have failed, Republicans have failed, Democrats have failed, independents have failed. Maybe I need to change my way of thinking. And Adam Kokesh gets an incredible amount of votes. He gets 15, 20% of the votes. I would absolutely agree with you. It would be a great step towards getting that message out to a wider audience. But I think if you look at all the anarchists and voluntarists in this movement, everyone has different approaches to get to the same goal. You know, if we're all starting in the East Coast of the United States and we're all trying to make it to California, and I think taking the northern United States route down to California, and you think going straight across the middle gets to California, and Randall wants to go through the southern states of California, we all think that's the quickest route. We could all be wrong. We could all be right. Who knows? But we're all going to meet at that one point eventually. And I think we can all agree that the state is dying. It is coming to an end. It could be in 1,000 years. I choose to take the path of talking to people face to face, very politely, of course, and getting them to really question their own beliefs. Because once they understand that what they're believing is a lie, they can now pick up that message. They can take that flag and they can relay it to somebody else. That's one way to spread a message. You can take that approach with the election thing. Get it in a nationwide on TV and have Kokesh up on the stage with the other politicians. So I mean, I think that's one way to look at this whole discussion. I think this was an awesome discussion. I couldn't really ask more from it.
Well, just be honest. Kokesh has no freaking chance in hell. But
I agree.
But Joe Rogan does. Joe Rogan has name cash. He is a popular celebrity. He has a lot of, you know, interested parties. And if we could actually get a Joe Rogan campaign to go into the political venue in order to spread a message, not to win, but in order to spread a message, Rogan would be probably the best choice, although Tom Woods might be potentially an option. I don't know. It's questionable. And then there's also a couple, not The Rock, Kane.
Kane.
Yeah,
Glenn
Kane
Jacobs.
could. Yeah, he could potentially be a very strong vocal advocate, and I would prefer Kane over Rogan, but I think Rogan's got a little more following.
Let's throw to Lou real quick, and I gotta close out. It's the time.
Let's say Tom Woods actually won the election because he's brilliant and he's charismatic, and I think he could actually draw votes in. And then let's say Social Security goes broke. Those goddamn libertarians fucked it all up for everybody. That's what's going to happen. Now, as far as having this central figure to deliver the message, that's the great man fallacy. That's the idea that some great man can go out there and bring everybody around. And yeah, Ron Paul tried it, but let's keep it real. Where's Ron Paul now? He's doing a shitty podcast. He needs Michael Dean's help on audio. But here's the thing. I work in the mental health field in my day job. If I'm sitting down with a patient and I say, you know what, you're really not that good at doing heroin and maintaining a regular lifestyle, or you're not very good with dealing with bipolar disorder and maintaining a regular lifestyle. If I say it doesn't mean doodly squat until the patient says, I have a problem. I need to seek treatment. I need to work on going into recovery. That patient is going to keep shooting heroin. That patient is going to keep having episodes, losing jobs, losing homes, losing family and friends and everything else. The best form of advertisement is word of mouth. So rather than having a central figure go out there and say, you need me, and let's keep it real, if Kokesh runs, unless he's a Democrat, he's not going to have a voice here in Detroit. But when people are seeing what's going on because they're going over and they're looking at what Threat Management Center is doing, they're looking at what Detroit Bus Company is doing, they're looking at what the Michigan Urban Farming Initiative is doing, they're looking at these guys over here, they're looking at the food carts over there, they're looking at all these little independent grassroots things, all these little seeds are sprouting roots and growing. That's how people see. That's how people decide that they're ready to make change and go into recovery from this horrible addiction to statism.
Thank you, Lusander. Thank you for your wonderful perspective, Mike, as well. Mike Daneau and Robert Kruger, thank you for all of your thoughts and your input in the conversation. I think we definitely, if nothing else, got people to be a little bit more of some of the police abuses and hopefully contrasted that to how in a free society we'd have other alternatives and there'd be other ways of dealing with conflict rather than having a centralized aggressive monopoly with the badge and no accountability to do so. We will definitely answer any questions in the chat or on Twitter. You can tweet us at Roads to Liberty at any time for show topics, guest ideas, or feedback on a past episode. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, guys. Thank you for listening and watching Voluntary Virtues Network. I'm your host, Randall Parker Jr. Follow us next time. Check us out Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Voluntary Virtues Network. We're out, guys.
Thanks for having me. Nice talking to all you guys. Worms.
Worms.
Night,
Bye.
guys.